I'm Karen Manus, Director of Children's Ministries at Sunrise United Methodist Church, and welcome to our Safe Sanctuaries training. So you may be wondering what Safe Sanctuaries actually is. Well, Safe Sanctuaries training is a way that the United Methodist Church has developed to reduce the risk of abuse for children, for youth, as well as vulnerable adults. And so what I'm going to be doing today is going through some of the larger points, especially as they apply to children, since that's my area. However, Safe Sanctuaries training is not just a one-day, one-time event. This is an ongoing conversation. So we have a Safe Sanctuaries training manual that would have answers to some of those finer points that you might have. And this is something where if you have questions, it's an ongoing dialogue. So feel free to talk to me and ask me questions, as well as other members of our staff. They can help you as well. So you may be wondering, what exactly is abuse as it applies to Safe Sanctuaries? Well, abuse, it really covers a variety of different behaviors. So abuse is anything that endangers a person's physical or mental health and well-being. And the specific types of abuse that we are going to be speaking about today can be physical abuse, and it can be sexual abuse as well. So anything that's an inappropriate sort of contact or behavior between an older person and a younger person, as well as anybody that is disabled or not able to give consent for these actions. We have verbal abuse, is when language is used to humiliate, degrade, or threaten another person. We have emotional abuse, which is also leading to serious emotional and psychological damage to another person, as well as neglect, where there's an omission of care that endangers a person's health, welfare, and safety. So all of these are different types of abuse. And we're not just talking about children, we're talking about youth. We're talking about any person that has a disability, as well as any person that is vulnerable. So such as an elderly person, we would consider them to be potentially a vulnerable person, a vulnerable adult. And so all of these people that we want to particularly express our desire to protect them, and we're reducing our risk as much as possible. Now, when we are a Safe Sanctuaries church, one thing that you'll notice is that most people would agree wholeheartedly that this is very important, and we want to keep all of the people that come to worship here safe. And I look at it very much like a security system in a house. So the house that has an alarm system is much less likely to get broken into than the house that does not have an alarm system. And so as soon as somebody that has an ill intent is coming into our church, as soon as that person learns that we are a Safe Sanctuaries church, that person is going to know that we have certain safeguards and protections that we have placed, and it's going to make it very difficult for that person to be successful in harming another person. So as long as we agree to all comply to the different policies of Sanctuary, then we should be able to significantly reduce the risk of something happening to one of our vulnerable people, as well as children and youth. So one of the first steps of Safe Sanctuaries are background checks. So every 2 years, any volunteer working directly with children or youth should have a background check. And we require not just a statewide background check, but a nationwide background check. And if anything were to happen to come up on that background check, it would be the staff member as well as the staff parish to go through and just make sure that we are comfortable with that person in the particular role. One thing that we do know for sure that Safe Sanctuaries is very clear of is that if any person is ever on a sexual offender list of any kind at any point, they should never be allowed to work with children. And so that's something that is very, very clear. There may be some other areas where it's a little bit It's a little bit more vague, but that's something that's extremely clear. If a person is working with youth, particularly driving the youth to particular events, and that person has had a DUI, then that's something that we don't feel is the best way for that person to volunteer. There may be other ways that person can serve the youth. So that applies particularly to different groups that are traveling to off-site locations. So every 2 years, we should have a nationwide background check. Vehicle background checks are for those that are driving youth or children to different events. We also ask that a person be a regular attendee of Sunrise United Methodist Church for at least 3 months before getting involved in volunteering. And we're also asking that every person who volunteers be every other year taking this Safe Sanctuaries training, and we are including watching this video as well as if you were wanting to read through the entire Safe Sanctuaries book, that would be fine as well, but particularly watching this video would count as your Safe Sanctuaries training. Another really important aspect of Safe Sanctuaries is that we have 2 adults working with children. On occasion, this seems a little bit excessive because sometimes we have maybe just 2 children in a room or 1 child, and we think, do we really need 2 adults? Because it's not really about 2 adults being needed to really manage that 1 or 2 children in the room. But for Safe Sanctuaries, it's absolutely necessary. We need to have 2 volunteers. Those volunteers need to have a background check, and we also need them to complete the Safe Sanctuaries training once every other year. So we absolutely do need the 2 adult rule. And we have allowed, now we do not want people that are related to one another to be serving together. So it would be like 2 sisters, maybe a mother and daughter, father, son serving together. We would like for them to be 2 adults that are not related. Sunrise has made an exception that we want to model what a family unit looks like and what a married couple looks like. So we do allow for married couples to serve together and count as those 2 volunteers. Now, that doesn't mean that, say, if you are a mother and daughter and you want to work together, that you can't ever work together. We just need a 3rd adult in the room for it to be Safe Sanctuary compliant. Now, when we do not have 2 adults in a room, one thing that we are asking is that we have someone that is roaming. So let's say we have 2 rooms and we have 1 adult in the hallway that is roaming between those rooms. And that would be Safe Sanctuary compliant, especially if the doors are left open to those rooms. And we'll get to that in just a moment here. So if, as a sort of a last resort, we do not have 2 volunteers for 2 particular groups, we could have 1 roaming volunteer that goes between the groups, which also leads me to one of our next guidelines, is that we need open doors. And this is a literal open door in the spaces that we meet in. So at no point should we have a classroom or any sort of space where the rooms are closed and nobody can see what's going on in that room. So that's why if you walk by Children's Church, you'll notice the door is always open so everybody can see what's going on there. Now, if for some reason momentarily the door needs to be shut, say the children are singing and using instruments and it's getting really, really loud and there's another class meeting, that sort of thing, then we can momentarily shut the door only if there is a window in that door and there's nothing blocking that window's visibility. So I would say momentarily, just for a few minutes until they get done with their instruments or whatever's causing a lot of noise, momentarily shut that door if there's nothing obstructing the window, and then the door can be opened again as soon as it's a little bit quieter. So that's just one way to handle that particular situation, but otherwise the door should always be left open, actually open at all times. And one good thing we have about all of our children's spaces as well as youth spaces is we have windows in those doors. So it's really easy to keep that to keep that part of the policy. If we have anybody that is working with youth, particularly, it applies that a person volunteering with you should be at least 5 years older than the person that he or she is volunteering with. So that really applies more to our youth group. And for instance, if we had somebody that was, say, 17 years old or 18 years old working in the nursery, and that person's working with, our nursery goes up to age 4, so that person's clearly at least 5 years or older than all of the children that are in the nursery. It's a little bit of a different scenario where we have youth group members, and then if we had somebody that's, say, 18, 19, 20 that wants to volunteer with the youth, it's a little bit different. Now again, that person can absolutely volunteer with the youth. We just need 2 additional adults as volunteers that are at least 5 years of age older than the oldest person that he or she is supervising. So that person can absolutely be a part of the youth group's activities. We just want them to be 5 years of age or older. So overnight restrictions. So when we have youth and adult chaperones, they need to be housed in separate rooms. We don't want adults chaperones sharing a space in a hotel with say, somebody that's in a youth group or a child. And so we should have separate sleeping areas, and we need to have at least male and female volunteers at overnight sort of trips as well as off-site places if there are both male and female participants there. If we had a group of all girls that were traveling, then we could have just 2 female volunteers supervising those girls. But if we have a mixture, for instance, of boys and girls, then we need to have at least 1 male volunteer and 1 female volunteer to supervise them on their trips. And we are asking that if it is an off-site trip, that we have at least 1 adult for every 6 children or each. Anytime that we are photographing or taking video recordings of children to be published later, whether it be on our website or whether it be live streamed in one of our services, if we have minors, we want to make sure that we have a media release form that has been completed by his or her parents. So anytime that we have those, we just make sure that we have that completed beforehand and before those published videos or photographs are released. And anytime that we are going on a trip, we want to make sure that we have a written permission form that has been signed with all of the pertinent health information for that minor so that the children can participate in that particular event. So what happens if you suspect that something has happened, some sort of abuse has happened, or if you have witnessed some sort of abuse taking place? What is the next step? Well, we want that to be reported, and we do have a way of reporting that. So the first thing is to make sure that we deal with it immediately. We don't want to wait a period of time. As soon as we notice that something is off and something may have happened, we want to deal with it right then. We have a policy where we are not going to be talking about this publicly until we know exactly what has happened, but we will contact only the parties that it pertains to. So, and we do want to remember that allegations are just allegations until they are proven otherwise. There's often a good reason for something that we don't quite understand, and of course we want to make sure that we fully understand the situation. So who do you report these types of abuse to that you witness or that you are suspecting have happened? Well, you would go to our senior pastor, but you could also go to either myself or you could go to the person that is over that particular area. So if it's a music area, you would go to the person responsible for that area. If it's a youth that it involves or a youth activity, you would go to that person that is over the youth. So you would go to the person that is responsible for those particular areas, and then that person is then responsible for following the next steps, which includes completing a report of the incident of abuse and calling the Wake County Child Protective Services to make that report as well, and contacting the district superintendent if the alleged abuse has taken place on church property, and if the alleged abuser is a church member, a church staff member, or a clergy member, as well as completing a suspected incident checklist and attaching it to the report of suspected incidents of abuse. Now, if the allegations that you have witnessed involve the senior pastor or the person that is over the particular area and you want to make that reported, then you should report that to the Staff Parish Relations Committee chairperson. That is the next person of contact to report abuse or suspected abuse. And that's it. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I will be glad. This is an ongoing discussion. We also have a Safe Sanctuaries policy manual that has all of the finer points that can help guide you through making sure that we are a Safe Sanctuaries compliant church.